Welcome to Inspiring Entrepreneurs, where we deliver wisdom and valuable advice directly from Canadian business leaders. Presented by BDO Canada. Don't forget you can read more thought leadership and expert advice from the BDO team at bdo.ca. My name is Dan Delmar of TNKR Media.
I'm Michael Newton from BDO Canada.
Mike, today we have really one of a handful of truly iconic brands in Canada. How many truly recognizable Canadian brands are there over the generations? There aren't too many, but Harry Rosen is one, named after its co-founder, Harry Rosen, of course. And Mr. Rosen passed away about a year ago. His son, Larry Rosen, is the longtime CEO now. And there's a third generation in the business as well. So an iconic menswear brand, a family business, and one that is really setting themselves up for success in terms of e-commerce as well in the future.
Yeah, it's a fascinating family success story. I mean, there have been many Canadian, family brands over the years. Unfortunately, not all of them have succeeded to this. And every time I happen to have the occasional conversation with my kids, and we bring up Eaton's or a few of others along the way, and I recognize that those were iconic brands that we grew up with that for many reasons just didn't get to that next level. But certainly Harry Rosen and the family have done a phenomenal job, starting from two guys. Harry and Lou started in 1954, so 70 years ago, and just kind of built from a tiny, like we would today call a mom and pop shop in Cabbagetown. And for those of you that recognize Cabbagetown name going back, that happened to be boxing fans, so that was where the Cabbagetown Boxing Club was out of at one point, creating some of Canada's best young boxers back then too.
Harry Rosen's story is really great. I mean, scrappy, entrepreneurial. He went down to the States, to Madison Avenue, to see what was hot and trendy there, brought the styles back to Toronto, and did a lot of bartering even. He bartered with some marketers in the beginning to get his name out there. It worked. He took off. And now, of course, there are Harry Rosens across the country, including at premium malls like right here in Montreal.
Yeah, I think they're in the 8 major cities, and if you look at the fashion game, is not for the faint of heart. There's no doubt, and I think that they've reinvented themselves while sticking to really what were the basics that they started with in 1954.
We'll talk with you about the future of family businesses later in the show as well. Plus, Larry Rosen's one piece of advice for inspiring entrepreneurs, all in the program today. But first, news, Mike. We're going to get to the thing, and we should spend a few minutes on this. That is creating a lot of insecurity in the Canadian business community. Of course, the threat by Donald Trump of a tariff of 25% on basically everything going into the United States.
Well, I think if you follow politics and you follow the Trump style, this was about as predictable as could get. At the end of the day, he wants something. What he wants and what he wants from Canada is yet to be determined. And I read an interesting article last night that started with, what is it that Donald Trump wants from Canada? And the response was, if you don't know, don't worry, you're in good company, because neither does our prime minister. So, the whole discussion of where that's going to go is about, Trump style, very much. I could argue with you and say that, it's the Trump chess game. I know that there's a number of people who would argue that it would be a Trump's checker game, and you can make a comment on intellect based on reading into that however you want. But realistically speaking, I mean, he always comes in like a bull in a china shop because he wants something else. And I'm not sure that his 25% tariff on every single thing has anything to do with having him put 25% on everything else, but what he wants in return, whether that's border security, whether that is certain industries. If I walk in and tell you, Dan, that, I'm going to tax you on everything, every single thing, and 2 months later I come back and say, well, you know what, I'm going to give you this and I'm going to give you that. And I mean, it is traditional negotiating style, right? You got two styles. The negotiator is one, I sit back and I let you make the first move and see where that takes me. Or I go in bold and I go in blazing guns and tell you this is where we're starting and hope that you just cave on some of those issues that I really want.
Did you ever read The Art of the Deal?
I did. I read that back in the 80s when I was at McGill. I would tell you that my perception of Donald Trump, since 1988, I think, or 87, when I read the book, is no doubt changed. But as we had mentioned on a previous show, reading Bob Woodward's The War, he does interview Donald Trump in 1989. I got to tell you, the man is consistent. You might not like him, but he is about as consistent and predictable. I think, everybody says he's unpredictable. He is terribly unpredictable, but his unpredictability in and of itself is predictable.
So it's not that we think he's bluffing. It's how much, by how many percentage points do we think he's bluffing? I mean, are there going to be some tariffs? Is it going to be 25%? Is it going to be 5%, 15%? Is there any possibility to blunt the impact of this threat?
Well, I think the first message you have to figure out is, what is it that he wants in return? Right? Once you figure out what he wants in return, I can tell you whether it's going to be 25%, 2%, 0%, 12%, or a whole bunch of nonsense, because we're going to give him what he wants. And I think that is essentially where we stand. Do I think that he would put in a 25% tariff north-south? I think that number is way overblown. I think that everybody that's panicking in that direction is falling into the Trump trap of what it is. Do I think he's going to put a tariff on? More than likely. Can I tell you whether it's 10% or 25%? No. But again, what is it that he wants in return? Because realistically speaking, the tariffs is just a means to an end, right? It's either a complete isolationism, which, if that's what he wants, then 25% will certainly give him that. But it's also border security. It's also power. It's also, we want Canada to contribute to NATO the way that. I mean, there are so many different pieces to this puzzle. It's going to be interesting to see. And there's no doubt he could also be using Canada to get to other places. It's the old discussion that if I'm going to treat my best friend this way, just imagine what I'm going to do to you.
So bottom line, for now, we have a range of possibilities, of course, and one of them is that we could be heading into something that's quite complicated. The other is that something will be negotiated, but we don't know anything for sure yet. So would you say entrepreneurs shouldn't make any drastic decisions yet? Perhaps prepare, but don't pull the trigger?
Well, do remember that 2026 sees us back at the table with Mexico and with the U.S. for the old NAFTA agreement. So there's going to be a little bit of posturing towards some of that in terms of what he wants from a pure trade perspective. Do I think that we should be watching what goes on? Most definitely. I think there should be the opportunity to try and continue to be improving efficiency and effectiveness in what you're doing. Do I think we should be running for the hills and hiding? Definitely not. But I do think that something will happen, and I don't know how that finds its way down, and whether that is a tariff or whether that comes in an additional government tax at some point in time. With Trump, it's always who blinks first, right? And we all know the man has no eyelids, so he doesn't blink. He's going to try and push in any direction that he can to get what he wants, and there's not a lot of people that are really willing to stand up to him.
If you're doing most of your business in the States today, are you looking in the next few weeks, months, to try to diversify that, looking to Europe or elsewhere, or you're still hanging back a little bit?
So two things. The first is, if you weren't, you should have been already anyways, right? I mean, I think with the opportunity to try and find a different market, I think just, Donald Trump coming into power again in and of itself created a lot of uncertainty. So you should have already been looking elsewhere to take your products, A. B, again, I think you take this as an opportunity to size up your efficiency, your production capacity, your marketing, because look at it this way: if you shore up and you become more efficient, and he doesn't put it through, you're way ahead of the game. If he does, you're ahead of most people. So there's nothing wrong with being proactive and trying to continue. There's nothing against, no matter who's in power, to try and improve what you're doing on a daily basis. So I think this is just a glaring opportunity, and some are going to do phenomenally well, regardless of what happens.
There's almost an assumption among many Canadian entrepreneurs that the business from the States will always be there. They're our neighbors. It's the world's largest undefended border. We have close ties culturally and economically. They're always going to be there, and the market is always going to be there. Now, for the first time in generations, we're seeing a sort of a threat to that. That's a very powerful thing culturally because it means that we have to be different kinds of entrepreneurs and that we can't just count on the US. I mean, for me, most of my business is Canadian, but I'd be lying if I say that I didn't count on occasionally American business just trickling in because it's there, it's a huge market, and you just have to put up your flag and you're bound to attract some American customers, right? But that might not be the case for long.
So I can say to you, Dan, while I agree that that is the concern, I can say to you, what's the difference between $1.20 and $1.40 on an exchange rate versus a tariff, right? I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, the effectiveness of what we deal with on an ongoing basis in what is significantly the biggest market for us, we will find a way to adapt. Do I think that that is going to have a potential, implication for people who aren't? I mean, we have the same problem with people who can't hedge their exchange when they're buying or selling product into the U.S. So it's there. It will. I think the market will continue to be there. It doesn't mean it stays in the mode and the model that you know now. And I think that's the important element here is, proximity is always going to create. I honestly do not believe that, the American economy is going to go completely turtle inwards and be 100% self-sufficient and not be buying from elsewhere. I also think that a large part of this is it continues to be a bit of an opportunity for those people that want to look at this in the right way.
A little bit more news and notes for the podcast now, Mike, and this State of the Global Workplace report released recently from Gallup. What are the highlights there? I see that they generally see the U.S. and Canada as favorable markets, although obviously we've had some developments since the report came out.
Yeah, I think the biggest concern for a lot of people right now continues to be employee mental health. There's always going to be an underlying economic component to what we do. And, as we've said before, whether that's foreign exchange, whether that's tariff, whether that's competition, whether that's technology, that's one element that we expect. The state of our employees, the state of mental health of workers is one of those variables that we can't fix so easily, and in this Gallup poll, I mean, it really kind of stands out to me and just how, I don't want to say how miserable people are, but realistically, it's not, they're not happy campers right now. And I mean, Gallup estimates that low employee engagement costs the global economy almost $9 trillion US. Uh, 9% of the global GDP is affected by lack of engagement or negative engagement from employees. They go as far as saying that 20% of the world's employees experience daily loneliness. Loneliness is highest for fully remote workers. We talk about work-life balance. We talk about life experience. We talk about so many of these things and how remote is supposed to be helping build that. When in fact, the stats are telling us they're creating more negative headspace. Where do we find that balance? And I think that continues to be the challenge. So when I go through, a lot of these things, and I do get fascinated by the mental state of mental state of humanity, but when it comes to the worker and the employee and how what's happened in the last 5 years is really accelerated what I think was coming 10 years out anyways. And it's now put it right in front of us. And you see the report saying that in 3 or 4 years, we're going to be back to the office. Yet you walk around an office, and I got to tell you, maybe they're coming back, but they sure as hell ain't coming back today because, most offices are certainly not in that environment. And if we can't manage remote employees properly and our remote employees are feeling, is this as lonely or negative mental state, we're heading into some kind of significant labor problems, and whether that's a shortage or whether that's shortened work weeks or what are we going to do to fix where this stands?
So Gallup has a bunch of really precise data points that they use to track what they call employee engagement. So they currently view that about 23% of employees are highly engaged, 62% not engaged, whereas 15% are actively disengaged. So at least a vast majority, I guess, of employees, according to the Gallup stats, need a bit of motivation. And when we look at the stats on engagement from over the past year or so, people coming back to the office, a little post-pandemic bump, that bump was there, but it's since stabilized. And so there's not really as much engagement going on as there was before the pandemic. Here's a quote that they had from one of their survey respondents, a guy they call Steven, a line operator. He says the following: I could push it, but I'm so frustrated with the way things are going that day that I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do nothing. And that to me is an interesting quote that they got from the survey, and one that they felt was representative of a sort of generalized employee malaise. They see their businesses, their organizations not growing, right? And so they're becoming discouraged with a lack of leadership.
Yeah, so this is the topic that gets me in trouble on an ongoing basis. I do not feel that the term engagement defines motivation, drive, and growth. To me, the term engagement, and it's not just to me. I mean, if you want to go online and search those definitions, engagement says I'm comfortable, I'm good, I believe where the organization is going, I'm part and parcel, I'm a member of the team. Well, that doesn't necessitate the next step, which is motivation, growth, a little extra, whatever that scenario is. So if you look at these numbers and you say your engagement level is low, and I take the decision tree out and I divide that up between who are motivated and driven versus those that are engaged and comfortable, you're going to get an even pared down, bigger side of what that number is going to look like, and that negative effect. So, across the way, the business across the street or across the country is battling the same thing. And I think the sooner that organizations can find that magic recipe, is going to make a big difference. I think we are in for a huge flood of opinion pieces and research articles and studies, because everybody is grasping with the same scenario right now. And even if your engagement level is high, it doesn't mean that growth factor that you need. I mean, let's be honest, if you need to grow by 10% and your team is engaged but not growing, where does that 10% come from? It's got to come from technology, or it's got to come from hiring more people, right? It's not going to come from that existing workforce. And if everybody is sitting with the individual's comment that you just said, well, I'm so frustrated, I'm not going to do anything, then we're certainly only going to make things worse. And, part of this article that I found very interesting was the discussion of managers. And, the whole discussion of what kind of implication and does a manager have. Managers have more negative experiences than non-managers. At the end of the day, we've talked on this show before about, for every 10 managers, you need another manager, and how I think we've created a professional manager stream along the way. And previous show in the last couple of weeks, we talked about how a generation doesn't want to become managers. I mean, is there more of an identity crisis right now, trying to figure out where we're going with all of this? Because we all know at the end of the day that who you work for and how you spend time with them is going to be one of the most significant impacts on whether you're engaged, driven, and motivated. Two people can have the same job, doing the same thing at the same company, and have two different managers, and one is, hey, this is the greatest job ever, and the other can't get out of the door quick enough. How do you get that message across? How do you get people to understand that? And how do you move a group of managers who in themselves are lacking engagement?
That word engagement always bothers me in the marketing context as well, because it's very imprecise. So what does engagement mean? Does it mean results? Does it mean money? Does it mean revenue growth? No, it just means showing signs of interest or hitting like on a computer screen.
And I got to tell you that when that becomes our baseline, I get concerned. I get concerned when our measurement is, are you happy? As opposed to, are you driven and motivated? Because that only means internationally we're going to continue to lose ground.
Well, I'm not sure many entrepreneurs are necessarily "quote unquote" engaged by this definition either necessarily, but that doesn't mean they're not doing their jobs properly.
True.
This one, however, this next stat, I think is a lot more clear, a lot more stark. They asked employees, are you actively or inactively? That's kind of to say, like, perusing the job listings. Are you considering changing jobs? And a slight majority of people say that they are. 52% just slightly more than half the world's employees are watching for or actively seeking a new job in 2023, according to the survey. That's crazy.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised it's that low. In
Really?
all honesty, I mean, we're living in a world right now where people are not happy. They're not satisfied. We see it in social unrest. We see it in theater. We see it in the movies. We see it on the news. That it's just a general malaise that exists, and that is going to work its way through everything from relationships to lifestyles to work. I mean, there was a quote at the beginning of this study that I found fascinating. They do this employee perceptions on mental health or perspectives on mental health from around the world. And one employee, a content management director from Japan, says, "You may think work and life outside of work may be separated, but I disagree. These are the same, concurring at the same time." Well, you know what? If you take that thought and you extrapolate to what we're talking about here, if I'm unhappy here and I'm unhappy there and I'm unhappy, chances are I got to try and do something where I have control. So what do people feel they have control of? Finding a new job. So if I'm unhappy, I'm going to start looking. Now, what does that mean to you as an employer? It means that, you know, likely more than 52% of your staff are at risk. Why do I say more than 52? Because the really good ones who aren't looking are actually going to get poached from somewhere else. So you got 52 who are actively looking to go somewhere else. And you got the other 48% of which maybe 10, 20, 30, 40% of that are actually at risk because people know they're good and they want them.
Gallup releases the full results, by the way. So if you want to dig into that, just go to gallup.com. And on a more optimistic note, they do say that 41% of employees experienced a lot of stress the previous day, which is actually down from 44%. So 3 percentage points decline.
There is no way, and no matter how much you can compartmentalize your life, that you are not going to carry forward either some good or some bad from home to the office or from the office to home. And we need to learn to how to manage that, how to compartmentalize it, and how to look at it and say, okay, you know, how much of that number of stress, Dan, do you ultimately think is all job related versus how much of that is getting to their job or taking the kids to daycare in the morning or just general lifestyle? We live in a very stressful world right now for a lot of people.
Mike, coming up next, we're going to be inspired by Larry Rosen, son of the late Harry Rosen, how to start from nothing to create a successful business, menswear business that goes across the country, and how to keep that relevant over generations. Larry Rosen joins us next. For more thought leadership and expert advice from the BDO team, head to bdo.ca. Larry Rosen is the CEO of Harry Rosen. Larry, welcome to Inspiring Entrepreneurs.
Thanks, Dan. Nice to be here.
The first question is the easiest for the few that don't know. What is Harry Rosen?
Well, Harry Rosen is a 70-year-old menswear specialist, quality menswear specialist. We operate across Canada in the 8 major markets. We're the dominant player. In fact, I believe we're the largest menswear retailer in Canada. And we specialize in better quality. And we've been operating in Canada for 70 years, and we've been operating in Montreal for just a mere 40 years.
Let's take a trip down memory lane before we begin. Maybe give us a little bit of history of your education, how you got started in the family business. I know at one point you tried corporate law for a few years, so I guess you joined the family business because either corporate law wasn't doing it for you. But maybe give our listeners just a little bit of what brought you to where you are today.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to maybe go back to the beginning of Harry Rosen and then sort of sashay into myself. My dad, Harry, started Harry Rosen in 1954 in a little offbeat part of Toronto called Cabbagetown on Parliament Street. He opened up a 500 square foot store and with his brother Lou, and he basically willed a business into existence. Every client that came in, he learned about, he earned their loyalty, and built quite a remarkable business. He was a real entrepreneur, really innovative guy. He like one of the things he did in the 50s is he went down to New York and bought that Madison Avenue looking suit, and he brought it back to Canada, and he made that his look, and that every young executive at that time in Toronto wanted that look, and it became very, very popular. So, anyways, he started the business and expanded it and in this throughout the 60s and moved down to the Bay Street area and became the largest specialty store in Canada. And and then he started expanding within Toronto through the 70s, and in the 80s he started expanding across Canada. As I said earlier, in 1984 we opened our first store in Montreal. Watching him, I had graduated from law school and with an MBA in 1982, and watching what he was doing, expanding across Canada. I was practicing law at that time and enjoying it. Don't get me wrong; it was an interesting profession, but watching what he was doing was just so inspiring. So I went to him and I said, Dad, what you're doing is so exciting. I want to be part of it. He said, okay, but no nepotism here. You got to earn it. And so I came aboard and, went through a lot of various positions within the company. I was a buyer. I was running groups of stores. I was the head buyer. And eventually by 1997, I became the president. In 2000, I became the CEO, and he kind of retired. That's my story. And and I'm sticking to it.
Well, I think your father passed away recently last year, if my memory serves, at like 91 or 92 years old, and obviously, took quite the place, within the Toronto market as well as in the Canadian retail space along the way. Running a family business, is always a challenge at the best of times. Running a family business for 70 years I'm sure, had a few of his ups and downs. What do you think still holds true today in a family business that may have held true when your dad and Lou started in 1954?
Well, I think there's a bunch of principles in family business that you have to adhere to. First of all, family business is the backbone of Canada. I mean, we always hear about the public things, but when you really look around at what's driving the economy, it's family business. And family business, you got to, the biggest mistake that family businesses make, and what I'm going to talk later if you want about my sons who are in our business and bringing a huge new dynamic. They're very interesting kids. How do you do multi-generational family businesses? Well, it starts with being open, being honest. And there's one fundamental rule that a lot of people ignore is that the kids got to come into the family business for the right reason. You've got to assess them correctly. I mean, this is not just to be disrespectful, but a lot of dumb kids have screwed up a lot of great family businesses. Or when I say dumb, I don't mean dumb. I mean people who weren't suited to the business. And what we did in our case, because it's a big business and we're many hundreds of millions of dollars, is we brought in an outside consultant to assess my sons, their sincerity, their interest, their ability. And of course, we were very fortunate. We had glowing reports. But the point is that we made sure that they were coming in for the right reasons and with their head on the right way, and that it was the right thing for the business. And that I think is the most important thing in family transition, is making sure is getting an outside third party to help you assess, because we're also partial to our family. We do anything for them. And sometimes doing anything for them, like bringing them into a business they're not suited for, is not the right thing.
Yeah, sometimes we're too easy, sometimes we're too hard. It's very difficult to get that kind of right, normal approach, if you will, when it comes to their education. A lot of families, really look to push their kids out of school to go somewhere else for a few years. I mean, in your case, obviously, you went into the legal profession, and if that wasn't going to chase you back quick enough, I'm not sure what was. But, and I've had a lot of entrepreneurs over the years tell me that they want their kids to cut their teeth somewhere else before they come in, like you said, for the right reason, but also for an opportunity to see things differently. What's been the philosophical approach to bringing them in?
Yeah, we were very, I didn't trust myself to do the job right. So I hired a top-notch family consultant. And basically the rule was they had to go out and work for 5 years. They both have MBAs from fine schools, and they have 5 years of extensive experience in consulting. One of them was with McKinsey. One of them was with Bain. One was worked for Shopify for a number of years in strategy. They're very talented and independently accomplished. And once they had sort of established themselves as credible people with experience, that's when we onboarded them into the business. So there was a rule about 5 years. There was a rule about having a business degree, and then of course having an outside assessment. So we're very strict because we employ 1,000 people. That's a responsibility. We have to have great leadership, and my kids are good. My son Ian is our president, and my son Graham is our EVP of strategy. They're doing great stuff. I'm very impressed with them, and they've made my life a lot easier.
It's fascinating because I think if you look at the statistical side of things, going from Gen 1 to Gen 2, the statistics of success are usually in the teens in terms of percentage, up to 30%, somewhere in that ballpark. And then if you look at the third generation, you're in single digit success. And so many people spend their time, like you said, either doing it for the wrong reason or the kids aren't hungry enough or whatever that scenario may be. I think we've all heard the commentary along the way in finger pointing. You look like you're well set going into the future. Are you feeling strong? Are you feeling that, this is, you're on the right track with everything?
You know what? The retail environment is very always changing. I'm 68 years old, but I feel like I'm 40 because I'm being challenged all the time with new ideas. And the fashion business particularly is a young man's business. So I'm very, I feel very ready for the future. But it's really, the way people react to the world is so different today than it was even 5 and 10 years ago. The importance of online, the importance of communicating in different ways. The old days when we used to advertise in the newspaper every Tuesday morning, they're long gone. We don't spend a penny on newspaper these days, or we do only on their online portals. And so the world's changed. And, one of the things that makes me very gratified about having my sons is they're young and they think their peers are important clientele. So they bring that mindset to the business.
The CEO of Harry Rosen joins us, Larry Rosen. He is, of course, the son of the late Harry Rosen, 2 sons of his own as well in the family business. So that's 3 generations. Larry, were you a little bit easier on your kids compared to how your dad was with you? Or did you pave the entryway a little bit smoother for them?
Well, let me say that I succeeded my father, and I'm very proud of it. My father and I had a very close relationship. But I view the successful succession of me as more of a fluke, luck, as opposed to a plan. And I've watched a lot of other family businesses fail. I would mention names, but that's not fun. So I just was determined to do it state of the art, to talk to the world's leaders in this area of family business transaction and make sure that we did it professionally. As I say, we view our primary responsibility not just to our customers who are so important to us, but to the 1,000 people that work for us. We have to make sure there's dynamic leadership here so that they have the best opportunity to further their career.
So you look at the future of retailing. Obviously, you guys have had such a significant place in the historical growth of retail within Canada, but you came from the small shop, as we call today the mom and pop shop type of approach in Toronto. And is there still room for places like that in this world? Like, are we finding our way out of what we know and what we grew up with as local retailers?
Well, listen, today's customer is very different. Online, by the way, is a significant portion of our business. It's not small by any stretch. So, today's customer convenience is very important. So if a guy is looking, say, for a white dress shirt and he knows his size and he knows the brand he likes, that guy will very often buy online. So when people come to the store, there's more of a purpose. The old idea of browsing around the store is a little, not obsolete, but it's less. And so when a guy comes to the store, it's got to be more of an experience. You've got to have really, really well-trained people working in your store that are friendly and engaging. And you've got to give that person a real retail experience. And that's what we that's our specialty really is customer service and showing people the great ideas, particularly in this day and age, because the business wardrobe today has evolved so much. I mean, I'm wearing today a soft sport jacket that's almost got a Nehru collar. It's very different but this is perfectly appropriate business wear for today. And today's customer needs guidance, and that's what we specialize in. So you've got to make it a very special, meaningful visit. You've got to give them a reason that they don't buy it online, that there's a reason why they come in the store.
You find a big difference, I mean, obviously, between the cultural and the mental approach to, say, call it rural communities versus, say, the city environment. Does retailing have a future offline? So brick and mortar, more so in the smaller communities where there's this sense of community and a sense of destination than there is in the bigger cities?
I think it depends on the kind of retail. I mean, there's a lot of retailers out there that specialize in servicing smaller communities and giving it a sense of personality. Our particular version of retail is, we're city retailers. We're urban landscapes. We need a density population because we generally sell better quality, and it's not for everybody. So we need to be we're only in the 8 major markets in Canada. If there's less than 1 million people, we can't really operate in the city.
Yeah, I grew up in the country, so the suit I wear to work 4 days a week was not really much that I could use on the farm. So there's no doubt there's a little bit of a dichotomy there in the exercise. Just going to touch a little bit on volunteerism. I mean, you've been active in the past, Princess Margaret Cancer Foundation, obviously the Ivy School of Business on the entrepreneur side. What would you counsel to the younger people that are getting into business that want to make a difference going forward in terms of spending time in this me generation of self-absorption?
You know what? There's little in my career that has been as meaningful to me as giving back. I know that sounds cliche, but it's true. The 9 years I spent on the board of the Princess Margaret Cancer Foundation was so meaningful, and I was on the board of the Ivy Business School, and these were just times that I and got involved with a bunch of other institutions. They're very meaningful. But and I think as a company, it's also important to embrace a cause. We had one of our senior guys in the year 2000 died of cancer, and that impacted so many of us here. He was so close to all of us that we all sort of sat down and said, what can we do? How meaningful can we be here? And then we talked to our customers and said, what do you want us to do in the world of helping people? And we talked to our associates, and everybody came back saying at that time there was very little representation in prostate cancer research. And we raised, I think, like $15 million over about 15 years for prostate cancer research. And you know what? We felt great because the people who were doing the research told us that our money made a huge difference to the progress they made, which is, it's treated much better today. So those types of things they're fantastic. And you got to add that element to your life.
Let's talk a little bit about staff and people and the change, I guess, we've seen in the last 5 years from pre-COVID, during COVID, to where we stand now, and people's commitments, how difficult it is to find good people. What's the philosophy that Harry Rosen continues to use in terms of trying to attract the right people and then to maintain them?
Yeah. One of the most fundamental principles is hire for attitude and train for skill. Everybody thinks we should go out and find people who know how to measure suits and how to do this and how to do that. That's not what you want. I mean, yes, if you can find someone who has the right attitude with those skills, that's bonus. But the reality is that we can train people. I mean, we do that all the time. But getting a person and in our business, they got to like working with people. They got to enjoy interacting with people. They got to be organized and responsible, because our people reach out to their clients and assist them with suggestions. I mean, they got to be online and in store. Like a lot of our associates, we have a portal where they can send suggestions online, and their customers can execute that right away as an e-commerce sale. you gotta work with the customer, and you gotta work with the times. So, as I say, the right attitude, person with positive spirit, and we'll train them to be great at what we do.
In terms of the interest of associates, the younger ones, do you see a lot of people who are really into menswear, or do you see the younger generation going more casual and going for garments that are sort of less tailored? Just looking at Mike and I mean, Mike's wearing cufflinks today and I'm wearing a sweater. So there's that there's that contrast on the show today too.
We evolve with the times. I mean, there's fashion is interesting, and lots of, believe it or not, our suit business is pretty good. I mean, a man is wearing a suit differently than he did 5 or 10 years ago. I mean, he's wearing it more for events or special occasions. But we're very blessed in that there's a lot less people in the suit business these days. And if a guy wants a good quality suit, we tend to be the destination. So our suit business is good. But obviously, we're doing more in sport jackets or soft jackets or toppers or outerwear than we ever have before. And we just move with the times. And young people today, we move them with the times. I mean, we got to be able to tell people how to dress for work, for play, for special occasions. That's what our specialty is.
I'm going to correct you, Dan. I'm in cufflinks 5 days a week. And even when I work from home remotely, I got cufflinks on. So, that's just kind of that old school feel to
remote cufflinks, really?
Oh yeah. I dress shirt and cufflinks if I work from home. Otherwise, I slouch in my chair and feel like I should be out back shoveling snow or doing something. So, but it's a headset.
I think you raised a good point, Mike. I think that there's one thing about dressing is that I remember the first time I went to a lawyer's office. We were on a big case we were we were suing somebody who screwed us of a lot of money, and the guy was wearing a golf shirt and a pair of jeans. And I thought to myself, I'm paying $800 an hour for this. And, I think in business, there's an importance to looking. I mean, you can dress casually, but you can look like you care and that you're there. And I think I value what you say about mindset, because I know when I'm in a pair of shorts, with all this remote thing, if I'm in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, I don't feel as effective at doing my work as I do when I, dress sort of business casual, so to speak.
I'm a 5 day a week kind of guy in the office, and suits 4 days, and then sport coat, and let's call it smart casual on a Friday. And it's kind of the running gag around here because there's only a few of us that are constantly in suits. And people ask me why, and I say because I work better. And they're like, well, how do you work better being in a suit? Like, what's the purpose? And I go back to being 6 years old and walking off the baseball field and my shirt hanging out of my pants and my father looking at me and saying to me, son, if you're going to play the part, look the part. And you know what? There was a lot of, at that time I was living on a farm, and lucky if, I wasn't full of mud half the time. But, the reality is to me, it holds true. I stick to that. I can't expect that everybody else is going to follow that. So, to impose a way to look. But I got to tell you, if I'm on the other side, I look at exactly what you said. If I'm charging out at, $700 an hour or whatever that number is, and you look at it and say, and I show up kind of half dressed or not dressed properly, to me, I'm disrespecting you. And I have a problem with that.
Well, as I said, there are ways of dressing casually that look very professional. That's the secret in business casual is dressing casually, but looking like you mean business. And we specialize in assisting people with that. But I'm glad to hear, Mike. It's nice to see you and I share the same vision.
Yeah, that's like I said. There may only be a few years between us, but yeah, I think there's definitely some stretch, and there is a little bit of hope left in the menswear retail side because there are a few of us left. So,
well, there's lots of hope. We have some pretty good business going. So their men are still buying.
Are you seeing a rebirth? I noticed a little bit lately, like you said, that's not in the suit side, but I'm finding a younger generation who seems to want to be a little sharper dressed, who want to be a little more on edge when they're doing things. And, maybe that's just going out on a Saturday night, but are still interested in looking good.
Yeah, listen, our business has changed, as I say, and it always will continue to change. But today's our business is well over half sportswear casual wear. Traditionally, we used to do mostly, in dress wear, suits and shirts, ties, and that type of thing. It's the tie business these days is, it's there, but it's quite small. So yeah, our business has evolved, and people don't really understand. A lot of people who may have not visited our stores in a long time don't realize just how extensive our sportswear offering is. Like, believe it or not, like there's rarely a week where we don't sell a couple thousand pairs of jeans. The Harry Rosen jeans, who would have thought, right? We sell tons of these incredibly great sneakers. Our best-selling sneaker is a Xenia Triple Cross sneaker that just wonderful. People spend $1,000 on a sneaker, but they're just so popular these days.
Larry, what is your take on the sweatpant material in suits? I'm seeing that as sort of a Gen Z younger trend. So just suits made of entirely kind of sweatshirt material.
Oh, well, we see it more as a double knit type of thing. It's more of a stretch period, more comfortable. It can be executed really nicely. I've seen it done well. I've also seen it done poorly. So, but before you buy it, come talk to me, okay?
Not for me. That's too casual even for me.
Dan, are you saying that my 1977 Adidas tracksuit is coming back into style? Is that what you're telling me? And I missed the memo?
Suit, yeah, sort of. You'll wear cufflinks with that soon.
Yeah, I don't think so. Larry, we've been nice up to this point. What have you done wrong?
Oh, there's I could write a book about all I've done wrong. The nice thing about being in business for as long as we have been is that we've achieved every error possible, and the secret with making a mistake in business is learning from it. We've bought too much inventory. We've bought too little inventory on occasions. We've hired the wrong people. We've made some poor investments. We've chosen some poor locations. If you're in business for 70 years, you're gonna find lots of things to screw up on. Fortunately, the mistakes haven't outnumbered the successes and the good decisions. And as I say, we've learned from when we've gone wrong. The biggest, if you said to me, what was our biggest error? In the late 90s, early 2000s, we invested in opening up Hugo Boss shops in the United States. And we opened up 9 of them. And because we thought it would be cool to expand to the States. And Hugo Boss at that time was a very hot label. We were not successful with it. And we ended up selling it back to Hugo Boss. And I guess the learning was that the United States is a very different market to Canada. If you look at the others, listen, why did Nordstrom's invest billions of dollars up here and then leave? Well, because they didn't understand our market. I knew from the very first day when I saw the selection of menswear they put in here that they didn't have a clue of what was going on here. And so, it's just how different markets are and how important it is to really be a student of the market. Montreal, for example, is so vastly different from Vancouver. And we run very successful businesses in both cities. So that's probably the biggest learning that you can't just march into another market without an understanding of it.
You bring up an interesting point on the learning. A lot of people shy away from making mistakes, right? Or won't admit that they've made a mistake. The idea of creating a cultural environment for the people, whether that's executives or whether that's the staff, to live and learn and do things and get better. Is that a culture that permeates its way all the way down within the Harry Rosen organization?
Listen, you have to empower people to make decisions. You can't. We have to consistently deliver a level of service and visual presentation across the country. And you can't do that centrally. You have to teach people and empower them, make sure they understand your strategy, your philosophy, and you have to empower them. And part of empowering people means they will make mistakes. They will make errors in judgment. And that's just par for the course. And you've got to accept that. And, as I say, there's an old rule in business that I've always adhered to, which is if people honestly are trying their best and they make a mistake, you don't kill them. The only time you really go hard on people is when they're not trying. And if people are trying to do their best, they'll make mistakes and you have to accept that.
I was going to say another one of my father's lessons along the way is he always said, if you're going to make a mistake, make a mistake and err on the side of commission as opposed to omission.
Good point.
Larry Rosen with us from Harry Rosen. So you guys are all set up in terms of e-commerce. Obviously, you're online. All that is set. But people still looking for that personal touch when they're shopping for a suit. The rare times that I do, I know I want someone to help me tailor it. How big is that sort of personalized tailoring, customization? How big is that as part of your business?
Well, it's huge. I mean, what's happened over the last 10, 15 years is the special order made to measure part of the business has grown exponentially. I mean, today's man, look, if a guy's going to spend 1,500 on a suit, he might as well spend 1,800 and get it properly customized, made to measure. So that part of our business has been, and our people are very skilled in doing that. I mean, don't trust me, we start way below 1,500. I'm not saying that's it, but I'm saying this whole customization, and particularly now in this era where men are buying less suits, they want the suits that they have to be very special. And we've benefited from that, actually, because a lot of people who when a suit was a commodity in a man's wardrobe, like in the old days when a man wore suits 5 days a week to work, they wouldn't splurge on a suit. Now a man, if he's buying a suit just for special occasions, he wants to look great. And that's our specialty, right?
You raise another really good point there. I mean, if you look at what has become of the male walking in to buy suits, I mean, you had a choice years ago. It was a low end, off the rack, looked like it was bought off the rack, or it was a high end tailored suit. There wasn't the opportunity for the individual to go in and buy a good quality, reasonably priced tailored suit. And that's, I think, a big shift that we've seen in I don't know how long, but it's certainly a shift that exists now that was not there when I even started working in the late 80s.
Yeah, listen, the technology now in being able to construct a suit and the quality, the new fabrications and stuff, it's really quite remarkable what you can get today. And as I say, every week we sell thousands of suits. So people are buying them off the rack, people are buying them made to measure. There's lots happening.
In 2014, you were named Retailer of the Year by the Retail Council of Canada. Obviously, a very prestigious award. What do you feel is the Retail Council of Canada's role? What should it be? And is there more that they could be doing to try and bring the image of retailing back during the changes we've seen, or a little bit of insight into some of that, maybe?
I'm a big fan of the Retail Council of Canada. I mean, they really represent us very well with the government. I know, for example, during the last negotiations for originally called NAFTA, it's called the US, whatever it is now, we were very, very concerned that they were going to take the de minimis exemption for e-commerce into Canada way up. But the Retail Council really worked with us, and I met with a number of ministers, and we explained why that would be very difficult for Canadian retailers, and they did a great job, and they've done a great job. Particularly during COVID, they really stepped up and supported the retail industry, helped us talk to our landlords better, help us talk to the government better. So I'm a big fan. I think they do a good job.
Our guest is Larry Rosen, CEO of Harry Rosen. His one piece of advice for inspiring entrepreneurs is on the way. But first, Mike, we wanted to chat a little bit about family businesses, the future of family businesses, how to sort of reconcile online and offline, and where things are going. So with Harry Rosen, they have an online component, very strong in e-commerce. Obviously, the brand name is one of a handful of brands in Canada that are truly kind of iconic and recognizable. They've got the multi-generational expertise in place. What's next in terms of their long-term plan, you think? How are they trying to stabilize things for the fourth generation potentially?
Well, look, they've got the third generation kind of set up at this point. I dare say I wouldn't want to jump the gun too much in terms of the fourth generation in any business until such time as we can see where this goes. Because to me, it brings up a whole discussion on the future of retail. And anywhere from what does that affect on in a small community versus the big box mentality of approach to going to a store, and what that means from an online perspective. They have certainly done a great job at walking into a retail for an experience, finding something you like, and then if you choose that you want to go and buy a second of whatever it is and being able to go online without having to go into the store. And I think we're seeing that a lot from a lot of retailers. My concern, and I've said this, many times growing up in a small community is what is the future of retailing in small communities? I mean, you can drive through the countryside and, it used to be tractors. What do I see half the time now is UPS and FedEx trucks or the Amazon truck dropping a big smile dropping off packages at small farmhouses. We grew up with the local hardware, the local pizzeria, the local, clothing store. Are we going to see this going forward? I mean, is this something that is going to go? We touched on it briefly with Larry in terms of what he sees from the type of industry that they're in, and obviously selling suits, you're only going to sell so many good quality suits or menswear in a small town, so there's a limitation there, but there's still a demand. And I think it's a statement on our society at this point is, what do we want? Do we want service? Or are we looking for pricing? Are we looking for compliance? Or are we looking for an experience? And I think that we are grappling at this from a community standpoint post COVID. And obviously COVID, I think, kind of, accelerated this discussion. But you see it. You'll see people in many places who say, no, I'm going to go, in Verdun. I'm going to stick to the small place that I've known in Verdun because that is home, that is culture. I'm willing to pay a few more dollars, for something that may be the exact same price if I walk into a big box store, but I walk into a big box store and I got to price check myself out. And if I can't find it, in aisle 37, then, well, I can barely find anybody to help me find where it should be. And for a lot of people, this is, it's a style choice at the end of the day, Dan.
I'm living in the Laurentians lately, Mike, moving out of Montreal a few years ago. And when we grew up here, there were a couple of maybe 2, 3 high-end menswear stores. There are none now. So the category doesn't exist anymore. If you want it, you have to go to a big box store in a suburban center or go right to the city, for instance. And this brings up the issue of e-commerce. And Montreal's own Shopify has really pushed everyone's game a little bit, made everyone a bit stronger. Harry Rosen is probably stronger because of sort of the cultural shift that Shopify made. People can go to their Harry Rosen store perhaps once, for instance, in Montreal, and then reorder online or fulfill that order at a distance, for many months ahead. They'll have their measurements online, their personal settings. So that to me is kind of the future. You have a hybrid experience. Yes, you do need some in-person service once in a while, but the reordering and the retrying on and the long-term exchange, regardless of whether or not you're rural or in the city, to me that goes online regardless. And soon, Mike, we're going to have drone deliveries. I mean, we are years, maybe certainly less than a decade away from having drone deliveries, especially for suburban or rural communities.
So basically, I'm going to step outside and look up, and they're going to drop the package into my arms.
With the shirt, with all your customized settings, it's going to fit perfectly. Everything you want, your color preferences, no more sending things back. That to me is the future of retail.
So where do we go from a service perspective, Dan? I mean, we've had this conversation within the restaurant industry. You walk into a restaurant and they tag on an 18% price for service charge, regardless of how good or how poor the service is. And you're set with that. Well, to me, I'm happy to spend 22% on exceptional service. And I have a hard time giving 18 for somebody who's not done the job that's there. By the time we standardize all of this, are we going to be taking that out of whatever that experience is? Are we ultimately going to say, you know what, we're going to drop to a lower level of customer service because that's the norm, that's the big picture? I mean, there's still a lot of people that are willing to pay for quality of service.
Is that drop in customer service and that detachment inevitable, though, as any industry modernizes? To me, that's more of like a rationalization. I do go into suit stores when I need a custom suit every 2, 3 years at most, right? But afterwards, if they have all my measurements, if they have all my details, all my preferences, what do I have to go back for? Just send me a new suit.
I totally agree. But that experience has to now be transferred from what you got in the retail environment to online. You can't be forgotten as, okay, here's your measurements. Good luck. We're going to send you your suit out. Go stand outside. I'm dropping it to you from your drone. I mean, there still needs to be an experience. And as we're having a very difficult time in the remote management world of learning how to manage remote employees. I think we're having a difficult time at this point having an understanding of how do we create that online experience that is, par excellence, that is one step ahead of everybody else, because I think that is going to continue to be the differentiator going forward. I mean, there's always going to be two defined markets, right? There's always going to be a higher end, there's always going to be a lower end, and we can argue till we're blue in the face whether the middle class or the mid-market is ever going to exist the way we once knew it. But the reality is I think that if you're going to try and hit a certain target audience, you better make sure whether that service is online or whether it's face-to-face and brick and mortar, that you're giving something that's way out there, because I got to tell you, there's enough opportunity to take my dollars elsewhere.
Well, Harry Rosen certainly seems to be striking that balance, appealing to a younger generation, having all their services online, all that customization, plus the in-store experience for those who want a more luxurious trip to the store. So, congratulations to Larry and all his family for keeping that legacy going. Very, very impressive and not easy.
Definitely not. I mean, 70 years in business for anything is a major accomplishment. But to take, like you mentioned earlier, that iconic brand and continue to build it and drive it forward, and now take it successfully into a third generation is really only a handful of people that have, or families that have been able to do that, and it is extremely impressive.
Let's bring Larry back in now as we come to the end of our show and ask Larry Rosen, CEO of Harry Rosen, for his one piece of advice for inspiring entrepreneurs. Larry, what do you think?
The essence of entrepreneurialism is taking a chance, taking risk. And you can't be cautious if you're starting a business. And, if you don't it's better to take the big chance and when you're starting up, and see if you can go all the way and failing, and then maybe a year later starting again, than it is to run defense. There's no room for defense in entrepreneurialism. Once a business matures, like our business is mature, obviously you have to be very financially cautious and solvent and all that. But to be successful, you're not going to be successful through defense.
Interesting, Mike. And as you mentioned, having a multi-generational family business going in now to the third generation and having such success is extremely rare according to the data. And it takes a lot of work, a lot of constant work, and never resting on your laurels.
100%. I mean, you look at, as we said earlier, the statistics associated with that success. But I think if you look at the individuals and you look at the individual families, stats are a very general discussion, right? So when you start drilling down to those that end up creating the success side of those low end numbers, you understand why it happens, and whether it is full on planning, or whether it is foresight, or whether it's risk taking, that opportunity will continue to exist. So even though some of those numbers are maybe lower going to that third generation, there's still a lot of awfully successful people out there, and certainly from Mr. Rosen's perspective, a very good example.
Thank you so much for your time today. That was really great.
Thanks, guys. It's been a lot of fun being here. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Don't forget to subscribe to Inspiring Entrepreneurs as a podcast on iHeart, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. We have lots of bonus material with Larry, as well as more news and notes and analysis of Trump's trade tariffs on the show this week. Next week, on our final radio show of the year, the amazing rise of Wealthsimple, the local financial behemoth that's now worth $5 billion.
Think Bait. TNKR Media. Good talk.